The man, described in his late 20s, early 30s, entered the Lapton branch of the Greater Newcastle Credit Union in Elder Street at around 12:30. There was only one female employee in the premises, and the man demanded money by producing a double-barrelled shotgun from his jacket. The attendant handed over the money and the robber fled. He's described as 175 centimetres tall with a suntan complexion. Police are calling for any information from witnesses of the hold-up.
Involved is a 12-year scheme to replace the Oberon-class submarines presently operated by the Royal Australian Navy with a completely new breed of warship. The Royal Australian Navy's submarine depot at Neutral Bay in Sydney was a very appropriate setting for the stepping up of the campaign by the New South Wales Submarine Task Force to have the $2.6 billion replacement submarine project built in this state and in Newcastle. The media group was told we've reached a critical phase in the decision-making process. November will see the completion of definition studies by the two overseas contract contenders, with a site announcement possible by the federal government in May next year. Construction of the facility will have to be started by early 1988. The task force stressed today that consultants' reports point to Newcastle as the best site in the country for several reasons: economics, technology availability and strategic considerations. The Task Force Advisory Committee Chairman Charles Curran says there's another strong point in our favour: industrial relations.
Newcastle does have a favoured edge in terms of industrial relations. There's been great achievements occurred, as you would know, in the Hunter area of very major projects which have been completed successfully, and a lot of groundwork has now been achieved which can benefit the agreement to be entered into between the contractors and the unions in the Newcastle area.
Well, the buzzword is accord. Do we have such an accord?
We certainly have the framework for the accord. The precise terms of the accord, of course, would have to be worked out when it's known who the contractor is to be.
The Department of Education's introduction of the Teachers' Efficiency Review has come under opposition by the Teachers' Federation. Negotiations are now being sought, and if they're not found soon, the success of the program may be jeopardised.
Join Ray Deneen and Anna Manzoni for all the news tonight at 6.
He approved the recommendation that the museum be established at the Castlemaine Brewery site. However, he asked that a further report be submitted to the council on the possible use of part of the site for an appropriate commercial franchise.
I think probably something in the food line and items relevant to the museum itself, knickknacks or those type of things would be probably the most appropriate thing. But that's a matter for the committee to look at to see what sort of function they think would be appropriate for incorporation in the museum site.
Why did the council find it necessary to bring a commercial venture into this?
Well, it's not actually a necessity, but it's a means of offsetting the cost of running the museum, which in turn will reduce the impact on the council's rates and the ratepayers.
Construction is expected to start around August this year, although construction is not expected to be completed until around mid-1988. Costs have had to be trimmed to get this proposal through council. It's expected around $1 million, and one wing of the original estimate has had to be cut out.
We've taken a number of things off, including a planned extension to the building, which has meant that we're going to be fully utilising the original heritage wing of the building, and I think that's probably a much better idea in the short term. We do, of course, have the longer term, the proposal of a stage 2, which would be up to the level of building that we had originally thought of with the architects.
There's no doubt that whatever type of new bridge is built at Swansea eventually, whether it be the now more likely low-level opening span or a high-level bridge, the community will still remain very much divided on the issue. And what the Newcastle Trades Hall Council was asking for, and has been asking for since last October, was for the government to investigate the merits or otherwise of the various alternatives. Mr Brereton has replied that there will be no such open inquiry, and the local member for Swansea, Mr Bowman, says that all such inquiries have already been carried out.
North of Parbury Road, Swansea, you have a DMR responsibility. Now, the Commonwealth can, as part of its bicentennial funding program, assist the DMR in particular locations where there are particular difficulties. They are doing this by supplying $3.5 million for the duplication of Swansea Bridge. More than that, they are not prepared to do when they have the massive commitment on the western side of Lake Macquarie with the National Highway.
The seeming inevitability of a low-level bridge at Swansea was further enforced today by the regional manager of the NRMA, Rex Bauer.
We support the DMR proposal for the low-level bridge, purely on the grounds of cost. We are not against the high-level bridge concept. That's the gold-plated solution, and unfortunately we don't live in a gold-plated economy. So purely on the grounds of cost, we support the DMR's proposal for the low-level bridge.
Look for them bounce bastards. Give it a weighty.
The permanent residents of the Belmont Pines Tourist Park say they are angered by the way they have been treated by council. 5 days ago, the council gave notice that 24 of the permanent caravans must go, as part of a major redevelopment of the park aimed at attracting tourists. A further 10 of the longest established residents will be allowed to stay, but the exceptions to the rule have only upset the residents even more. Those who have been told to move by the end of September say uprooting their homes will be difficult and expensive.
There's the traumas, the stress that's involved, plus the cost, tremendous cost. You can imagine the vans, a lot of them with aluminium annexes, what this would mean to uproot them. They'd have to have specialists, contractors to do the job, and then touring their vehicles away if they had to go to Swansea or Swansea, as the council has suggested.
Tomorrow a deputation will meet the state member for Swansea, Don Bowman, to ask for his support. The residents say they have the support of the Australian Pensioners Association, and the Trades Hall Council is organising a discussion for later in the week with the Lake Macquarie Council to try and resolve the dispute.
The dispute dates back to January the 1st, when the Maritime Services Board increased its port operational charges by 7%. Ever since then, the coal companies have been refusing to pay the higher charges because they say they weren't consulted about any increase. The matter came to a head late last week when it's alleged the MSB threatened to stop the loading of colliers unless the full charges were paid. It's a threat, however, that they appear not to have carried out because several vessels were loaded in Newcastle, Sydney and Port Kembla over the weekend, including the Sapporo Maru, which is leaving Newcastle Harbour behind me right now. A meeting was held between the MSB and the Coal Association in Sydney this morning, and it appears that the MSB has backed away from its former stern line. It now appears that further talks will take place between the Maritime Services Board and the Coal Association before any increased charges are implemented. The Maritime Services Board has backed away from its threat to prevent the loading of colliers unless coal companies agree to pay increased port charges. Talks were held in Sydney today and more talks will follow.
Join Ray Deneen and Anna Manzoni for all the news tonight at 6.
The Lake Macquarie City Council will tonight consider a counter-disaster plan for the city, including tougher controls on the transportation and dumping of toxic waste. The issue has been rekindled after 17 firemen were affected by toxic inhalation at a routine bushfire over the weekend.
Join Ray Deneen and Anna Manzoni for all the news tonight at 6.
The Department of Health has decided to do something about Cessnock and Kurri residents' health. They've appointed a community health nurse, Lorraine Hunter, to undertake an 18-week planning program, which will concentrate on gathering information, local opinion, and encouraging community interest in a long-term heart disease prevention program.
The figures released earlier this year in the media showed that there was a problem. We were aware of that, and the Health Department has been looking at this particular problem statewide anyway.
So once the planning is finished and the program is up and underway, how are you going to handle it? What are you going to do?
Well, we're not really sure at this stage, and a lot depends on the responses from the community and other things that we find out. But I imagine that we would be working in schools, in the workplace, more input into the media, things like that.
Federal and state politicians, including the Minister for Transport, Ron Mulock, were at the launching of the twin-hulled ferry. Mrs Heather Wade, wife of member for Newcastle Arthur Wade, named the vessel the Shortland and smashed the traditional bottle of champagne against its bow to wish it well. The Shortland can carry 200 passengers and is fitted with bicycle racks and ticket machines. Its sister ferry, the Hunter, is due to be launched in May. Both vessels should be on the Stockton to Newcastle run by June. The first of 2 Newcastle to Stockton ferries was launched at Carrington Slipways this morning. The launching of the $900,000 18-metre ferry represents the end of a battle for the retention of the Newcastle ferry service. Mr Wade was at the forefront of the fight to keep the service running. He says he had to battle with private bus companies as well as some residents, but now he's satisfied that it's all been worthwhile.
Well, I'd nearly given up all hope, because when the private operator threatened to take the service off if he didn't get subsidy from the government, and government wasn't going to give subsidy, he withdrew the service without any argument, just took it off the run, and that was in '82, and it took my actions and probably the actions of Cabinet before we could bring around a service that we now have under the auspices of the Urban Transit Authority.
Local ambulance rescue workers say it's fortunate that there has been no major rail disaster in Newcastle. Each year there are around half a dozen train accidents in Australia, and with that in mind, the ambulance approached the union 3 weeks ago with the aim of briefing the ambulance officers on the procedures if there is an emergency. It is an appropriate choice of venue, with beginning in producing the majority of the state's railway cars. The ambulance workers are given basics training in handling rail emergencies, and today's exercise was aimed at giving a more detailed understanding of accidents involving electric trains.
We felt that the ambulance rescue officers should have a particular knowledge of how to gain access to these trains, how to dump the power that might be generated by the train. You can imagine getting someone out from underneath the train that's been run over to make it safe for our officers to climb underneath with regards to the electrical output.
So what sorts of problems does the electrification pose to ambulance people like yourself?
Well, our new trains have been made vandal-proof, and I guess in strengthening the trains, you can imagine this has increased the lack of accessibility of rescue tools to a train. So it's important for us to learn where to place our rescue tools to gain access and treat patients.
Colliding with a train is a daily one. Like the bus driver who was killed yesterday when his bus containing 43 children was hit by a train at a level crossing near Denman, Ray must too cross a treacherous railway line and hope that his bus makes it across in time. He says he has just 7 seconds to cross the line if he spots a train after he's made his decision to proceed.
Well, I'm very concerned about this crossing out here. I've been pretty close. This last time was a train just missed the back of the bus, and I'm very concerned about it.
The students on the bus also help Ray spot the trains. They say that on their 14-kilometre trip home from Muswellbrook each day, they have been afraid that a train would hit them. What about yesterday's accident? Has that made you scared?
Yeah, sort of. The railway track's a long straight one now, so it's more dangerous than that one.
Their parents have spoken to the authorities about their fears many times, but up until now they haven't had any satisfaction. They hope that yesterday's tragedy will shape the authorities into improving the crossings. Shire President John Jobling says his council will press the SRA for prompt action.
The SRA was asked by us when they built the line originally to put protection mechanism on each of the rail crossings. Now obviously for cost it'll probably have to start off as being flashing lights and bells. That's at least a start. We'd like them then to go to perhaps boom gates, but the ultimate one, not only for our shire but for everybody else, for the pedestrians, for the vehicles and the engine drivers, is to get rid of open level crossings throughout this state.
It's the big kid's Tinker Toy, 20% larger than any other dozer on the market, and the description of its engine reads like a wish list for the modern dozer motorist. The 31-litre V8 turbocharged direct injection diesel engine. But that's not all. It also looks after the operator, providing a soundproof, air-conditioned cabin with power steering to help control the monster. The machine was made in Japan by Komatsu, the second largest manufacturer of heavy machinery in the world. They say they have an even bigger Dozer still in the prototype stage. But the Dozer doesn't only look good and make a loud noise. It's also an important part of Cassellaine's rehabilitation scheme to restore the disused mines to their natural state.
Primarily for rehabilitation work, but also to be used as a general purpose bulldozer within the fleet of 8 bulldozers that we have on this mine site.